So good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Watkins. I'm an academic technology consultant with curricular and research computing. My colleague Brandon Rush is also on the line. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for our virtual workshop on Adobe Audition, which is an audio editing software. So we're going to dive right in. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So this morning we are looking at audio projects with Adobe Audition. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. We'll be going over the basics of this software, which again is called Adobe Audition, and that's a part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. We'll talk about how to get the program installed on your program. We'll look at the process of recording using the program, creating a new audio file, as well as some best practices for recording audio. We'll also look at editing that file so you can make tweaks to it in case there's something that didn't come out quite right and you want to make an adjustment. We'll look at incorporating multiple audio tracks into what's called a multi-track session using another aspect of the Adobe Audition software. And then we'll talk about how you can make adjustments to that multi-track session so that it sounds just right. And then we'll close with talking about the process of exporting, stitching together a multi-track session and exporting it in a format that listeners or students can listen to as one audio file. We'll also talk just super briefly about some alternatives in case Adobe Audition is not the perfect program for you. And then we'll conclude with just some additional support and tutorials and additional resources for working on your audio projects. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we dive in. We are recording this session as we have with all of our other CRC faculty workshops. This is just so that folks who weren't able to join us this morning can access the workshop, as well as if there's anything that we covered today that you want to revisit and get back into, that'll be available on our Remote Teaching and Learning Lyceum course page. And the session will be between half an hour and 40 minutes, and we'll definitely leave time at the end for questions. But if you do have a question that comes up during the sort of presentation portion of our workshop, please feel free to throw that in the chat. Brandon is going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll definitely answer any questions on the fly as they come up. So we're going to dive right in. So the first step, obviously, is getting the program Adobe Audition loaded on our computer. As I mentioned previously, Adobe Audition is a part of a suite of programs called the Adobe Creative Cloud. This suite of software programs is available to Bates faculty for free. To get that suite of programs loaded onto your computer, you can visit this website. And I should make a quick note. In the initial invitation for the Zoom meeting this morning, I included a hyperlink to this slideshow. And the slideshow itself includes all of the hyperlinks for loading these programs. So you're welcome to take notes if you want, but you can also just visit the slideshow, and each of the hyperlinks within the presentation are directly linked there. So to visit creativecloud.adobe.com/apps, that's going to bring us to a login page where you can enter your Bates email address or even just bates.edu, and that's going to bring you to that familiar Duo federated login page, which will then give you access to the Creative Cloud download page where you can select multiple applications and specifically Adobe Audition. So we are going to now talk about, once the program is downloaded on your computer, taking those first steps for recording a new audio file. So I'm going to hop out of our slideshow and pop into, let's close that window, Adobe Audition. So when you first open Adobe Audition, you're going to see a page that looks something like this. Now, what might appear, and I think most likely will appear, is a little introductory window that has some tutorial videos and introduction to the program. Definitely feel free to check those out. Adobe does a really great job of providing supplemental materials. But if you want to bypass that and just get straight into playing with the program itself, just click the exit key at the top of that window and you'll come straight to this interface. So what we're looking at when you first open Adobe Audition is what's called the waveform editor or waveform view. Basically, this is a tool within the software that allows you to record new audio files. So to do so, we're going to just double check a couple of different settings, and then I'll go through the basic sort of tools or parts of the interface that allow you to record a new audio file. So the first thing that we want to do when we're creating a new audio file is to decide on a name and a couple of additional settings to make sure that we are working with a file that we can then locate later. So we're going to start by clicking File, New, Audio File. That first option, multi-track session, we're going to talk about a little bit later, not to worry. But to record a new audio file, you want to select File, New, Audio File. Now that is going to open up a little dialog box, which gives you some options, including what name you'd like to give your new audio file. So I'm just going to give that the name, Example Audio Lecture. And then you'll see a couple of other options below that. The next one is what's called sample rate. Don't worry too much about this. It's going to be set to 44/100, which is a standard sample rate. But for those of you that are curious, sample rate basically means the number of audio samples that occur in a single second. So it's 44,100 audio samples per second. Don't worry too much about that, but that's a standard sample rate for audio. If you're recording something that needs to have a much higher fidelity, let's say you're playing it through a sort of multi-speaker system, or it's like a really complicated and large piece of audio, you could maybe increase the sample rate. Or if it's something that you know that needs to exist on in a much smaller file size, you could lower the sample rate. But for any of the purposes of sharing a lecture or having something that's going to stream online, 44/100 is totally acceptable. The next option below that is what's called channels. And you'll see that there are three options. Mono, which is that the same thing is going to play out of left and right speakers. Stereo, meaning that different audio is going to come out of the left and right speaker. Let's say if you were recording an instrument or multiple instruments. And then 5.1, which is surround sound. If you're recording something that's just your voice speaking, like an example that we're working with today, a lecture, or maybe even a podcast, all you need to select is mono. We'll have an option for selecting stereo later when we get to multi-track session. But if you're just recording your voice, feel free to click mono. Bit depth you can leave alone. That's basically the sort of bandwidth or frequency range of your audio. And then we're basically all set with our initial settings. So we can click OK. And you'll see that the interface changes and we're about to get ready to begin recording. Now, before we start recording, we need to talk a little bit about microphones. Now, obviously, since we're all on this call here on Zoom, so that's a video conference, we have access to some kind of microphone, right? Some of our computers have a built-in microphone that exists really close to the web camera. If you're working on a Mac or a PC, that's where it might be. If you're working on a laptop, the microphone that's built into the computer might be in the sort of hinge of your laptop, sort of near the base there. But it's also perfectly acceptable to think about considering an additional microphone that you could use for recording audio. This isn't a must, but it can pretty dramatically increase the quality of your audio recording. Even something as simple as a pair of Apple headphones with the microphone built in, or Bluetooth headphones with a sort of microphone built into the ear, those can possibly increase the quality of your audio recording. Now, when we change the microphone that we're using from the built-in computer microphone to something else, we want to double check that our program that we're using to record, in this case, Adobe Audition, has the correct input settings. Basically what this means is the way that sound is coming into the program needs to be set to the correct setting, as well as the output, meaning the way that we're going to have that audio be played back. So the way to check that is to navigate up to the top menu bar, Adobe Audition, under Preferences, select Audio Hardware. Think of this as hardware-like tools, the tools that you're using to record your audio lecture, podcast, whatever it might be. So when I select Audio Hardware, that's going to open up a new menu here, which gives me the options to select a default input and a default output. So that's like we were just talking about before. how is sound coming into the computer, into the software Adobe Audition, and then how is it being played back. So for default input, I'm just going to select iMac Pro microphone. That's my computer's built-in microphone. If you had plugged in, say, a snowball mic with a USB, or if you were perhaps using a mixer or something that involved much more advanced audio equipment, you would want to make sure that that's selected here. I'll give the sort of disclaimer: if you are recording using a microphone that's plugged into your computer's headphone jack, that's going to automatically record using that microphone, so you can probably just leave default input as set to iMac or computer's default microphone. And then default output, iMac Pro speakers, that's going to come out through my computer speakers. So this is looking how I want it to look. I know that I have the correct input and output set, and I'm ready to do my first test recording. So I'm going to click OK, and we're back to the waveform view interface. So I'll draw your attention down to the bottom center of our screen here. You'll notice where my mouse is sort of moving along here, a couple of controls. If any of us have ever worked with like a tape deck or like a personal audio recorder, you're probably going to recognize some of these controls, right? Play is play, pause is pause, stop is stop. There's also some jump to playhead buttons, which allow you to zip back and forth from the beginning to the end of your recording. And then, of course, this red circle is our record button. When I select this button, the application is going to start recording using the default iMac Pro microphone, which we set as our input, and we'll be able to continue that recording for as long as we want. And then if I press it again, it's going to stop recording. So we're just going to give a quick test of that right now. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on Adobe Audition. All right, so I've pressed the record button again to stop, and now I can see that in this sort of center viewer screen, I have what's called a waveform. This is probably a review for most of us, but a waveform is basically a visual representation of an audio file. It gives us a sort of way to look at what we've recorded that is going to be listened to. So to play back what I've recorded, I can simply click and move this red bar, which is called the playhead, to the beginning, which is on the left, or I could select the move playhead to previous, which would bring me back to the beginning. And to play back, I could either press the play key right here, or I could press the space bar. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on Adobe Audition. All right, so that's sounding pretty good. You may have noticed when I just did playback on this recorded piece of audio that as I move through as it plays, down in the bottom, very bottom of my waveform view screen, this area, the levels, was doing something interesting. Let's take another look. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture. So that's moving to correspond with the volume or decibel level of the audio that was recorded. Now, this is a really helpful tool for making sure that your audio sounds pleasant and acceptable to our ears. A really good rule of thumb is to keep an eye on your levels and make sure that they hover around -12 decibels or -12 dB. You can see that visually represented on our level monitor by that sort of, right where the yellow, we're sort of in the center of that yellow. Green is going to be much lower, harder for the ear to hear. Higher than -12, we're going to get into what's called peaking, which is unpleasant on our ears. It's too loud. It's a decibel level that's unpleasant to the ear. So we're basically just going to keep an eye on that, and it's always a good idea to do a quick test recording to see, okay, what's my physical relationship to my microphone if I'm using the built-in one? How is this audio generally sounding? And then I can go back and record again if it's something that's not quite right. Now, it's worth taking a quick pause to discuss the difference between the view or editor that we're in right now, which is the waveform view, and multitrack. Waveform view is this is kind of dramatic, but it's called a destructive editing view, meaning that any changes that I make to this audio file in the waveform view are going to ostensibly be permanent. Now, that doesn't mean you can't select undo by hitting Command or Control Z, but basically think of this as a generative tool that any edits that you make to this file are going to be saved and not adjustable later. So if, for instance, I take a listen to our example lecture here, and I decide that there's something I don't want to hear, I'm positive that I don't want it included in my finished product, let's say maybe the cough at the beginning, I can decide to click and drag to select a portion of this audio file and simply press delete, and that's going to eliminate that portion of the audio file from our recording. So now if we play that. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture. Pretty simple, right? So this is a great way to make quick major edits to, say, you were getting ready to record, or you stumbled or needed to find a different bit of your notes. This is a great way to make those big changes. But again, to remind you, it's destructive, meaning that you can't go back and then change that later. So let's say that we did, however, want to make a couple of adjustments and experiment, as well as include some other audio files in our finished product. Is there a way to do that with Adobe Audition? Why, yes, there is. We are going to move out of our waveform view and into multi-track view, the multi-track editor. So to do that, I'm actually going to create, rather than a single file, what's called a new project or new multi-track session. So to do so, I'm going to go back up to File, select New, and then there it is again, multi-track session. I'm going to select that, and then I'll have a similar dialog box to when we created our waveform project, or excuse me, our waveform file, where I have some options, including giving it a name. So I'll call this example audio project, as well as a folder location. This is really important to make sure that it's saved in a place on your computer or external hard drive or whatever you're using to save that you can navigate back to easily. For my preference, I'm just going to do the desktop of my computer. But if I wanted to get more specific, I could hit Browse and select from there. Template, which is a number of different sort of prefabricated opportunities for how our session is going to be structured. I'm going to select none for now because I want it to be the sort of most blank possible slate. But these are good examples of, let's say you were definitely recording a podcast, or if you were recording an audio session with a band, these might be good options to consider. But for our purposes, I'm going to go with just none for now, no template. Sample rate, which we talked about, I'm going to keep that the same. Bit depth, going to keep that the same as well. And then finally, this is the option for the channels on our master sound. Now you'll recall, because I was just recording my voice, I selected mono for our audio file. For our final channel master, I'm thinking I'm going to leave it at stereo. Now, why would I have just mono for an audio file and then my multi-track session be stereo? Basically, this gives me the option to include audio files that are mono, meaning that the exact same thing is going to play from the left and right speaker, but then also stereo music files, such as pre-recorded music, or a selection from an interview, or something that has left and right specific channels. So I'm going to leave that at stereo, which gives me the option to have both mono and stereo. Now I have my options set to how I want them. I'm going to click OK, and you'll see that we've moved to a totally new interface. And as opposed to one sort of waveform view, we have multiple tracks, which are going to be opportunities to incorporate multiple audio files in our finished multi-track session, which will end up as a single audio file. So if I head over to our top left-hand screen, where we have a little file management folder, you'll see what's selected currently says example project. This is the project that we're working on right now, but also example audio lecture. That was the new piece of audio that I recorded just a couple minutes ago. To bring this piece of audio into our multi-track session, all I need to do is click and drag into one of these tracks, and it will be included in my multi-track session. Now, unlike the waveform editor, which requires us to make destructive changes, meaning we can't go back and change them later, the multi-track session allows you to edit, but then also make multiple changes or adjustments, such as where does this exist, or perhaps if I want to adjust the volume or add an effect to this audio. So we'll go over quickly now a couple of really, really simple adjustments that we can make to our audio files in the mix and the multi-track session view that can really make a big difference in the ultimate sort of quality of our audio project. The first is obviously volume. Volume is the #1 factor in terms of how clean and clear does our audio sound. As we talked about with levels, it's good to keep an eye on, is my audio hovering around -12 dB? Can I make an adjustment so that it's sounding, just right to the ear? As we may have noticed from our example audio lecture, our volume on this specific audio file was a little too loud. So if I want to lower that volume, I can simply hover my mouse over the bottom left corner of that individual track, and you'll see a small set of 2 arrows appears. If I drag this to the right, it allows me to increase, and you can literally see the waveforms increasing, the volume of that audio file, or I can slide it to the left to decrease. This is a super easy way to make those quick adjustments to your audio so that you know that it sounds just at that volume that you want. We can give a quick preview. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our... That's looking and sounding so much better. It's right around -12. Now, another quick adjustment we can make is to add a fade in or a fade out to an audio file. If you hover your mouse over the top left or right corner, this creates what's called a pan. So if you click and drag, you'll see that yellow line appears. This is a fade in, or excuse me, this is a fade out or a fade in that is visually represented by that yellow line. So if we give that a listen, we'll notice, and it may be a little bit hard to hear over Zoom, but you'll notice that now, as opposed to the audio starting at a certain volume level and continuing at that level, it's going to fade in. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our... That could be a great addition to maybe some of your audio projects. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about the volume level and the shape and duration of the audio that I have recorded and included in my multi-track session. But I know that I want to add another audio element. Let's say I was recording a lecture and I wanted to include a clip of something, or I wanted to include some music. To import new audio files into your multi-track session, meaning that these are audio files that already existed before you started the project, all you need to do is select File, Import, File. There's also a quick way to do it by selecting this folder with an arrow next to it to import a file. So I have a piece of music that I've labeled music, and I'm going to bring this into my multi-track session by selecting Open. Now, it's not going to add it to the multi-track session yet. It's going to add it to the library of audio tracks that we are working with. To drag it in, I'm going to do that same process of click and drag. Now you'll notice I've brought this new audio element onto its own track. It's extremely important to keep individual audio files on their own track, because that allows you to make audio volume adjustments, effects, filters, whatever you want to do to each individual file without affecting accidentally another file that's on the same track. So think of it as like you're layering all these elements together. Each element needs its own track so that you can make adjustments. I can also see, even just visually, this music is going to be considerably louder than any of the other audio elements I have in the project. So that's an adjustment that I definitely will want to make right away. So I'm going to bring that volume down. Now, as you can probably see, this music file it's a lot longer than my sort of mini lecture here. So how can I make an adjustment to this so that it's the correct length? I could certainly scroll along to find the end of the clip and maybe click and drag to adjust the, to trim it, to bring it down to length. But if you're ever working with a multi-track project or multi-track session and you want to zoom out, let's say it's quite long and you want to find another part of that audio project, use this top slider at the top center of your screen. And if you click and drag either edge of this slider, it's going to let you zoom out to get kind of a macro view of your project as a whole. Now, you're not changing the duration of anything. You're just sort of, think of it as stepping away, right? Stepping away from the audio file. Now, if I want to make an adjustment to this music track to bring that down to length, I could hover my mouse over the right edge and click and drag this down to length so that it looks like it's about the right length. Now, I'm quite zoomed out, right? I'm too far away to make the adjustments that I want to make, so I can bring my slider bar back to a view that's much easier to see what's going on. Great, so this is looking pretty good. Now, I definitely can make those fade in and out adjustments that we talked about earlier. But what if I want to have a piece of audio that's playing, but that's at a different level at multiple points on the multi-track session? Let's say I want music to be playing at the beginning, kind of like intro music, and then I want it to fade down, but continue play underneath myself speaking and then fade back up. Do I need to make multiple individual audio files by cutting up this piece? I could do that, but I could also do something that's much more simple. This is a process called envelope editing, or you could also think of it, if you've done any video editing, as keyframing. You're deciding specific points on a track and telling the piece of audio to make an adjustment at those specific points. So I'm going to basically select this top line here, click once where I want to make a change, and it's going to add, you can probably make it out there, a tiny blue diamond, and then I can select multiple points along this audio file, and I'm able to click and drag, so think of this as visually sort of sculpting the volume of this audio piece to a level that I think will sound pretty good. So let's give a listen and see how that sounds. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on Adobe Audition. All right, I think that sounds pretty good. It's definitely has the shape that I want it to. If I wanted to say, adjust slightly the volume of the underscoring so that it's a little bit less soft, I could certainly add another keyframe or envelope edit to bring it back up. But if I, let's say, accidentally added a keyframe or envelope edit that I didn't like, I could just simply select it and then delete that individual spot on our track, and that's going to bring that back to the previous structure. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about what I have thus far. It's, it's looking and sounding pretty nice. How do I take this project, which is right now only exists in this software, and stitch it together, export it, and share it as a single audio file that I can then email or share on Google Drive or upload to Lyceum? The way to do that is to basically take all of these individual elements and export them as a multi-track mixdown. So there's a couple of steps involved in that, but they're hopefully going to be pretty intuitive. To export, we're going to select File, Export, Multi-track Mixdown, and then Entire Session. The reason we want to select entire session as opposed to selected clips is we want to take all of the audio elements that we have on these multiple tracks and bring them together into one audio file. So when I select entire session, that's going to create a new audio file, but we have some options about where this is saved, as well as its name and then also a couple of different options in terms of the fidelity and file type. So I'm happy to call it example project mixdown. That looks great. The location is going to be the desktop. I'm happy with that. And now we're on to format. So when you click format, you're going to see a number of different options for audio files. The two that I would recommend that you consider using are going to be the bottom two on this list. The first, MP3, hopefully that's familiar. That's a very standard audio file. It's one that we listen to a lot for our music or podcasts. The other is WAV, or .wav. This is another option that is slightly higher fidelity than MP3. The trade-off, and that can be really great. You can get a really, really nice sounding audio file. However, the trade-off is going to be file size. So if you're recording something that's, a 15, 20, 30-minute lecture or podcast, and you know that it's only going to exist online, it's just going to be streamed by students, or you might want to have it be emailed back and forth. You may want to consider keeping that as an MP3 as opposed to a WAV. But both of these are going to be pretty much universally accessible formats for people to play on their computers or smartphones. So I'm going to select MP3 since I know I'm probably going to want to share this file. And I can leave my sample rate and format settings the same. And I'm going to select OK. Now, if I minimize my window here, I will see that a new audio file has been created, and I'm just going to press the space bar to preview it. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on Adobe Audition. All right, there we go. Example lecture created. I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I can press the space bar again to minimize out of that view. Now we've exported, we have something we're really happy with, but let's say we're working on an Adobe Audition project that we want to save and return to later. Let's say we're recording part of it now, we want to record the rest of it later. How do you get back and forth into your multi-track session? To do so, we're just going to save our project, and it's going to give us a couple of options. This window that appears first is going to appear if you have brought in any audio to your multi-track session that does not exist in the multi-track session folder that Audition is going to create. So for example, the music that I brought in to this project was just on my desktop. So Adobe Audition doesn't quite know where to find that. What if I delete it from my desktop accidentally? This window that's going to open up is going to give you the option to create a copy of that file that's going to live neatly in a project folder created by Adobe Audition. Clicking yes to this option is always, in my opinion, a really good bet, because it means that it's going to be drawing audio from a place that the program can always find. So I'm going to select yes. And then in a similar logic, because I created our example audio lecture, that very first project that we were working on in the waveform view, because I created that, but didn't make any saved file version of that, it's asking me, would you like to save that file so that you can access it later? I'm also going to select yes to that. Now I have the option to create a new folder and decide where this folder lives. Similar to the process we were talking about with file management earlier, just make sure that this is a place that you can definitely access with ease. For some people, it makes sense to use their desktop. For some people, it's documents. For some people, it's an external hard drive. But just try and be fastidious with where you're saving these files so that you can easily access them later. For me, I'm happy with just desktop. All right, so let's give ourselves a test here. We are now going to try and access our project, which is created in this folder. And you'll see that this is a project file, and it has this extension .sesx. That's Adobe Audition's file codec. I'm going to double click it. And there we go. We can return to our project and continue to make edits. Then once we're ready to save or export, we can just follow that same process of file, export, multi-track mixdown, entire session. So I just wanted to quickly walk through that, that process for saving and returning to your work. So we're happy with how that looks. And we've created our little example. I'm just going to return to our slideshow quickly here. So we've covered a number of different steps, working with the waveform editor, working with the multi-track editor, some mixing options for audio adjustments, exporting and sharing. I just wanted to quickly cover a couple of alternative audio editing programs. Adobe Audition is an industry standard audio editing software. And what that means is it has a bunch of tools. The trade-off, however, is that it has an interface that can feel really overwhelming. It can feel like, wow, I do not need all these tools. Even just in the lecture today, I'm feeling like I can't follow this. I need something that's simpler. I wanted to offer a couple of other tools that might have a more simplified interface, but that offer some of the same features. The first is a program called Audacity. Audacity is free, it's open source, it's available for anyone to download, Windows, Mac, whatever you need. And it offers many of the same features as Audition, but as I was mentioning before, it's a slightly more simple interface, and it might be a good bet if you're feeling like Audition is not the right fit for you. Another program, and this is one that's also available for free, is called GarageBand. This is available, unfortunately, just for Mac users only, but in the similar vein to Audacity, it offers many of the tools of layering audio files, recording, making adjustments to volume, maybe adding some effects, but its interface is just much simpler than Audition. It's more of an entry-level program. So these are two programs that I really like, and I think they're actually very powerful tools. So if Adobe Audition hasn't felt like it's the right fit for you, definitely feel free to check those out. The last option I wanted to mention is kind of a hybrid of all of these ideas, which is that if you're wondering, okay, I want to record audio, but I also wanted to incorporate some of the audio that I already have from existing classroom sessions or lectures. If you're ever creating a recording using Zoom, let's say you're recording a class session or you're making your own lectures using the Zoom record feature, you could, when Zoom creates a file folder of that recording, in addition to the video file, it's going to create an audio-only file. This is something that you could then bring into Adobe Audition or either of these other alternative programs and make some adjustments to that audio file before then exporting and sharing it on Google Drive, Gmail, Lyceum, whatever makes sense for you. As I mentioned at the beginning, the slides from this workshop were included in the invite to the Zoom meeting. So feel free to click on these hyperlinks, and there's a tutorial for how you can deploy some of these aspects of Zoom local recording for creating audio versions of a recorded meeting, class, or lecture. And I just wanted to note also that when you're using Zoom to record locally, that's going to give you access to those files on your computer. If you've ever used Zoom cloud recording, those files are going to be accessible through your Zoom account online. So you'll have to download those and then bring them into an audio editor. But basically the reason I bring that up is audio could be a low bandwidth option for students who maybe don't have access to enough network connectivity to consistently watch video. So just wanted to bring that up as a possibility as well. So finally, I just wanted to draw your attention to two resources for continuing to learn about Adobe Audition. Adobe has a number of really great video tutorials, which are available on their website. These range from the stuff we've covered today of just getting started to the much more advanced kind of sophisticated high-level audio engineering, if that's something you're looking to get into. They've got some great tutorials available there. And then also our Digital Media Studios website, which we're using as sort of a clearinghouse for a number of these different tools and tricks and tutorials and resources. So we'll try and keep this page as up to date as possible, and it includes a page specifically for audio projects, as well if you're working on any video projects and looking to record video as well. So with that, I think we've reached the conclusion of the presentation portion of our workshop this morning, and I would love to turn things back over to the full group so that we could cover some of the questions as they've come up in the chat, and then also leave some time to go over anything that comes up as of right now. So thank you very much for bearing with us as we go through that lecture. And Brandon, I'll maybe turn things over to you so that we can go through any questions that have come up in the chat.
Sure, yeah, the first one that Charles Nero brought up at the beginning was asking about Bluetooth or Apple branded microphones, how much they are, if we have access to them. I know there's discussions with the higher ups at Bates about purchasing some more accessible ones. We have some higher end ones of the DMX that you can check out, but probably not for everybody. Do you know more about that, Jamie?
You know, I wish I had a sort of quick, clean answer that was, yep, we've got a bunch of super great ones that are easy to use and available at the digital media studios. But the truth is, even the headphones that come with your iPhone, those little plug-in headphones, or the, what are they called? Sorry, Brandon, the ones that just go in your ears and have the Bluetooth. Those are totally acceptable for bumping up the audio quality from something that's just your built-in computer microphone. Those are going to work really, really well. And especially with considering creating a lot of content, what's nice is those are tools that basically you can just plug in and use. There's no additional software that needs installing. There's no sort of learning curve in terms of using them. I should have mentioned earlier, I'm sorry about this, I meant to bring it up. A good rule of thumb when you're working with an external microphone, whether that's something that, you know, it's just your headphones, or maybe even considering, wait a second, hey, where is my computer's built-in microphone? Just try and keep basically about 3 fingers width of distance from your microphone, and that's going to really bump up the quality and sort of feeling of acceptableness to our ears for the audio that you're creating. One of the reasons why built-in computer microphones sometimes sound a little garbled just has to do with the distance, the physical distance that you are from that microphone. What other questions do we have, Brandon?
Carol, you just put one I didn't get to yet about, is there a reason, or you want to go ahead?
Oh, earbud mics.
I was just wondering if there's a reason not to store all the objects that were made in the making of our project into the project folder that we made at the end. Because I ended up like 4 things on my desktop, and it seems like the place to store them is there.
Yeah, that was the, basically what you're navigating is something that I was navigating as well, which is, oh, I have this thing that already exists in one place, I want to bring it in. That first box that says, would you like to make a copy of it?
Yeah.
That's the opportunity where, actually, I'm going to share my screen real quick, Carol. This is a great question. The imported files, now this includes all of those things that we both recorded and imported. So if I have, let's say, you know, this music file, which is what I started with originally,
Right.
I can either get rid of that, throw it in the trash, or put it back in a folder where I don't need it. When I open up the project file, it's drawing that file from this folder. So short answer is they absolutely want to end up stored in that project folder. But the problem is you haven't created the folder yet until you've clicked save. So a workaround could be, before you record anything, just click File, Save, and then you've got a folder to work with, and you can drag stuff in there to start with.
But when it made its copies, do I now have 2 copies of those, or?
That's correct. You do have 2 copies of those.
So I could just throw away all of the first ones that I made?
Yep, exactly.
Because they've given me another copy of them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Sorry if that's confusing. It's basically, you can open up and start a project and start working before it's actually saved a folder for you to work in. So if it's simpler and makes more sense, you can always save before you've created anything. That's going to create a folder, and you can store stuff there. What other questions do we have?
I think we're all caught up on chat, unless I missed anybody, but I guess we could feel free to sort of audibly ask questions now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll come back. I guess again, it's about copies, because I brought in a piece of music, I put it in there, it asked me if I wanted, it said the sample isn't the same kind of file, can we make another copy? So now I wonder if I have 3 copies of my Aretha Franklin song on my computer, or if, and what I should throw away at the end. So I guess it's kind of repeating my last question in a way, so that I don't end up with a huge amount of debris.
Yeah, totally hear you. If it's asking you if you'd like to save it in a different format, that is creating another copy.
Okay.
And then also, Carol, you working on a Mac computer?
I'm on a Mac.
Yeah, then a lot of these audio files are actually also stored in your music or iTunes library, in addition to the copy of them on the desktop. So unless it's something that's like a very personal, precious audio file, you can definitely throw those things away that are existing outside of the Adobe Audition project file.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And it's also worth noting.
Jamie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
That's okay.
Just a super quick point. It's audio files in general are going to be considerably smaller than video files. So if, for instance, you do end up with a number of different audio files in one project, or you're navigating the issue that Carol was just bringing up, it's not going to be, it's likely not going to be a serious concern for storage on your computer or anything like that. They're much smaller than video files. Sorry to interrupt, Charles.
That's okay. I've used Audacity before. Do you think it's is there a major reason why I should shift to Adobe? Will Adobe allow me to do something more that I couldn't do in Audacity?
That's a great question. I am so a champion of Audacity because it's free and it's available to everybody. So I think that if you're having success working with Audacity, unless there was, you know, a more complicated project that involves instruments and multiple types of recording, Audacity is going to be a great tool for recording and mixing podcasts or audio lectures or things like that. So I'm pro Audacity. I think it's great.
Okay.
What other questions can we answer at this stage? All right, well, I think if we don't have any immediate questions for the time being, I just like to wrap up by stating again, oh, do we have one more? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
You said this before, waves and MP3s can be read from PCs, and they're both completely universal?
Correct.
And the MP3 is bigger than the wave?
Sorry, it's the reverse. The MP3 is slightly smaller.
It's smaller than the wave. And I saw it had AIFFs in there too, so yeah.
Yeah, if that's a format that you're looking to work with, you could definitely do that. I tend not to recommend that one because it's a little bit less universal, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Well, if anyone has questions that come up in the sort of coming days or weeks, I would just really reiterate, Brandon and I and the other CRC staff are here to help. And I'd also say thank you so much for taking time on a nice summer morning to hang out with us and learn about this audio editing program. I really appreciate it and look forward to working with you all soon.